Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you're helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all of his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. Holy wisdom, holy word. Thanks be to God.
Amen. Now, Jews and Christians have been telling this powerful story for over 4,000 years to remind themselves and the rest of the world that with the power of the infinitely creative compassion and justice that we call God, the oppressed will be free. In this story, the Egyptians feel increasingly threatened by a minority group in their midst. So they decide to use these people as cheap or free labor on construction projects and in farm work mainly. The minority is still dangerous, though, because of their sheer numbers. The Egyptians are becoming a minority in their own country. Now, so far, this may sound a little familiar. But the Egyptian government's solution is male infanticide. And so the Pharaoh enlists the help of the midwives who attend the Hebrew women. But as often happens, the oppressive power of the state is subverted by the very tools it attempts to exploit. The Pharaoh's trusted agents, the midwives Shiphrah and Puah, invent civil disobedience. Well, so now Pharaoh has no choice but to get tough. And his revised policy is to hunt the little boys down and drown them. And now the focus moves to another individual, a woman named Jochebed, and we find out her name, by the way, in Exodus chapter 6. So her name is Jochebed, and she commits another kind of civil disobedience. She hides her newborn son from the police. She manages to keep him a secret for 3 months, but it's getting harder as he grows. And so she makes the painful decision to give him up to save his life. But she chooses very carefully where to leave him. And then down to the river comes the Pharaoh's own daughter, and she also disobeys the law. By her own father's mandate, she should just turn that basket over into the river and walk away. But she picks the baby up, and she is moved by his crying. The baby's big sister Miriam has stayed close to see what will happen, so at least the mother can know how it all turns out. The princess hasn't exactly stated yet that she'll adopt the baby, but Miriam takes it for granted and probably actually makes it happen. And so, with her help, the baby whose legal status in this country is crocodile breakfast is given back to his own mama. Now, most of us who attended Sunday school, and this includes Jewish kids too, were taught that the story is a testimonial to God's ability to perform miracles under the most dire of circumstances. And when we look more closely at the story, we see how God really works. The future liberator and lawgiver of the Hebrew nation has been saved and nurtured by 5 women who quietly refused to cooperate with evil. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said once, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." Sometimes we wonder. America hasn't reached the point of mass infanticide or industrially organized genocide. But we can't avoid knowing what our government is doing to non-white people and increasingly to white people too, particularly journalists and elected officials and protesters. ICE agents, or people disguised as agents, are assaulting and kidnapping brown people off the streets. They are patrolling churches and clinics and schools and disappearing our neighbors. They have broken down apartment doors in Chicago in the middle of the night to zip tie terrified toddlers and kidnap their moms. They have threatened ambulance drivers in Portland who were trying to take an injured protester to the hospital. And this week they went on a rampage through a farmer's market in New York City's Chinatown. But that arc of the moral universe does bend. And it bends because someone, some small group of ones, have decided they can't live on their knees any longer. And they stand up, reach up, and pull that arc of history down until it does bend toward justice. And this story, Moses and the Bulrushes, offers us 5 models of how to make that happen. First, there's the passive disobedience of the midwives who simply refuse to do their job. Did they take the long way round to the houses of the mothers? Did they forget some of their tools and have to go back? These women frame the story in such a way that the Pharaoh can't actually blame them, which allows them to keep their jobs and keep on passively saving lives just by quietly boycotting the mandate. Now, Jochebed, the mother, makes an active choice to disobey an evil law. She probably wasn't the only one who did this. Mothers all over Egypt must have been creating little nests and hiding their children in stables and chicken coops and singing loudly to drown out the baby's noise. Her daughter Miriam, in spite of the danger to herself, stays by the river to see what will happen and report back to her mother. Miriam acts as a witness. She is old enough to know what's going on, and she watches and takes her opportunity to nudge the princess toward right action. And then we see a powerful person using her power in support of justice. Pharaoh's daughter knows what she's doing, and she knows too that as an Egyptian, as a member of the royal family, as perhaps even her daddy's favorite daughter, only she can get away with it. Her power is limited. She was not included in that meeting where her father and his advisors decided on that hideous policy. But because she is the daughter of the Pharaoh, she is able to rescue a Hebrew child. She uses the power she has to make a difference that less powerful people cannot make. And finally, this story shows us still another kind of action toward justice. The Bible doesn't mention this, but it's there. It's the power of community. When Jochebed decides to hide her baby, you know the neighbors had to help. They pretended not to hear the baby cry. They lied to the police. They hid him when his home was being searched. They offered their own children's clothes and toys as the baby grew. They set aside their own grief at sons and grandsons and nephews slaughtered by the police to help this one baby survive. It takes a village to save a child. And in each of these actions, compassion is the motivator. It's been said that justice is compassion in action. Each of these women, moved to compassion by a newborn child, takes the best action she knows and acts for justice. And so does the community. So, how might these 5 women take action in 2025? The midwives appeared when Trump demanded a purge of anything resembling diversity, equity, or inclusion, and accommodation, by the way. Federal workers committed malicious compliance by following the absolute letter of the executive orders. They removed from public view any mention of the Tuskegee Airmen, which was a heroic, highly decorated group of Black pilots in World War II. They also removed the name of the plane that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the Enola Gay. There were numerous complaints from the public, and the administration was forced to backpedal and say they didn't mean those Black people or that mention of the G word. I think the midwives might be out on the streets of Portland right now confronting semi-lethal weapons with inflatable cartoon costumes and line dancing. Jochebed disobeyed an unjust and evil law, and this is a more difficult role, and it can carry heavy consequences. American news media recently took on Jochebed's role when Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, demanded that they comply with his new rules for limited access to information from the Pentagon. The rules amounted to government censorship. Dozens of media outlets were told to comply, but only one, a far-right outlet, did so. Even those that had originally caved to executive orders and lawsuits refused to go along with censorship. The role of Miriam is being filled by both thousands of citizens with cell phones and by mainstream and alternative news sources. The administration has done its best to convince us that Chicago and Portland are war zones. But photos and videos are showing us the truth. Dancing frogs and T-Rexes and naked cyclists and hundreds of thousands of nonviolent protesters in the street that probably included a lot of you last week. But also praying clergy attacked by semi-lethal weapons and masked men dragging parents from their cars and testimonials of families and neighbors trying to find out where their loved ones have been taken. Pharaoh's daughter has also appeared in the form of state officials who refuse to send their national guards into other states or allow militias from other states into their cities. Pharaoh's daughter also shows up as the white women who put Mexican flag stickers on their cars to lure ICE agents into wasting time by detaining them. She is the traffic cops in Chicago and in small towns who are ticketing and towing ICE vans. She is the firefighters in Bell, California, a tiny town, who use their trucks to block ICE vehicles and force them out of town. In 1956, when the Supreme Court ruled against segregated city buses in Montgomery, Alabama, Martin Luther King wrote this: "According to your ability and personality, do not be afraid to experiment with new and creative techniques for achieving reconciliation and social change." And Margaret Mead famously said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever did." So, your Sunday school teacher was right. God does work miracles in the most dire of circumstances. And God does this by moving in us, among us, and through us, even as God worked through those 5 women who chose justice and compassion over compliance with evil. Amen.